MetroPolitics on Jewish Week TV. I'm here today with the Republican candidate for the Attorney General of the State of New York, Staten Island District Attorney Dan Donovan. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
How's the campaign going?
It's absolutely going wonderful. There's 2 weeks left. It's very exciting. We have momentum, we feel, going in our direction right now. A recent poll came out and had us down by 4 points at a time when, really, as the underdog, we didn't think we'd be this close. We haven't began to start using our resources. But now we will, so we're absolutely thrilled.
Are you concerned about the top of the ticket? Carl Paladino has gotten such negative publicity the last few weeks since getting the nomination for governor. Are you concerned about that hurting the turnout among Republican voters?
No, I think, the voters in New York are very smart, and I think they look at each individual race. They decide who they're going to vote for governor, then who they want to vote for the United States Senate, comptroller, and then they look at who they want to vote as Attorney General. And I think when they look at the Attorney General's race, they look at it as the most non-political office of the all statewide run offices. When I was asked at an editorial board, was I going to run a partisan Attorney General's office or a bipartisan, I said I'm going to run a non-partisan office. The Attorney General is the chief legal officer for all the people of our state and represents our state in many matters. There's no room for partisanship there. But I really truly think that the voters will determine who they want to vote for governor, and then look down the other ballot and look at the other races to determine who they want to vote for. When you look at people who have endorsed Attorney General Cuomo, such as Mayor Bloomberg and Mayor Koch, and they both endorsed me, I think they're showing voters that you could vote and split your ticket and end up with good government. Their independence.
Any coordination between your campaign and his?
No, none. I've only actually met the man twice. Once before I had announced that and he came to introduce himself to all elected officials in the city, and I'm the district attorney of Staten Island, so he introduced himself to me. And then one other time when we were in a waiting room to do a Channel 7 news show. It was the only 2 times I've ever met him.
Now, you've been quoted as saying that you would not be the sheriff of Wall Street as Attorney General. Of course, that's a reference to Eliot Spitzer and how he viewed his role and the name they gave him prosecuting Wall Street crimes. How do you view that? It's important to protect the investors of the state, and that's just as important as worrying about keeping them here, keeping Wall Street here in New York.
It is important. What I said was that I didn't need a title in order to do my job. I'll be very aggressive in combating corruption, whether it be on Wall Street, in our Medicaid system, or where a survey that came out today, 58% of New Yorkers believe that our state government is infested with corruption. And I think why now, in this time of our state's history, it's important to have a prosecutor in the Attorney General's office. Andrew Cuomo was a prosecutor, Eliot Spitzer was a prosecutor, but we've had non-prosecutors as Attorney Generals, Bob Abrams, Louis Lefkowitz. But at this time in our state's history, when corruption is rampant in Albany and people in New York State are crying for somebody to rid corruption out of our state government, I think it's important to vote for an independent prosecutor for the next Attorney General.
Well, how high a priority of your office would that be?
It's going to be a priority. We have to protect investors. We've seen how our pension plans have been milked out of millions of dollars because of some of scrupulous activities on Wall Street. So I think what this is actually, it's what we call in the law a red herring or a smokescreen. Just because I don't need a title, people, my opponents saying I'm going to be soft on Wall Street. I'm going to be aggressive on corruption wherever it is, and if it's on Wall Street, we'll root it out. What I did say was you don't have to destroy the industry to root it out. You don't have to destroy our state government to root out corruption there. You just have to rid the bad guys out, and that's what I intend to do.
And one thing you've spoken out very strongly about is the member item funding that legislators give out for projects in their districts. It's very important to some of the community organizations to get that funding. How would you balance the need to strictly monitor those member items? Of course, the governor in this budget has eliminated them all, vetoed them, but how would you balance that with the realization that those grants are so important to community funding, to programs that operate that are intrinsic to those districts?
They are important, and that's why I want to make them more transparent and have more accountability in them. When we see members of our legislature using our tax dollars to fund not-for-profits that they have a financial interest in, that's taking monies away from not-for-profits that actually need them and will use them properly, not misuse those funds. So my plan to fight corruption, particularly with member items, and have members swear out affidavits that they are not funding any of the not-for-profits that they own or their family owns or they have a financial interest in, will allow us to give more monies out to those not-for-profits who are performing a wonderful service to people who are less fortunate than us and who need our service.
I know you had meetings with Hasidic leaders, you've met with the Orthodox Union. What are some of the concerns that they brought to you that are important to them?
I mean, I think, you know, some of the issues that I recognized before I got there, but then got to explore further with some of the leaders in the Jewish community is accommodations in the workplace for people who observe their religion. Certainly the member items, and I explained to them, as I explained to you, I think there'll be more money available for those legitimately run not-for-profits when that comes about. And their main concern is having a voice. When my opponent said that he would give it an annex to the Reverend Al Sharpton in his House of Justice, the press asked me what my reaction was, and I said 19 million people will have an annex in the Attorney General's office when I become the Attorney General. Everyone will have a voice.
How do you feel about vouchers or tax breaks for people who send their children to private schools?
Yeah, that was a discussion we had, you know, with various groups, and you know, New York City, particularly New York City, the New York City public school system now services about 1.2 million children. If those parents who send their children to private school decided, and they do have a right for their children to go to public school, if they decided that they wanted to go to public school, we wouldn't be able to take them. We don't have the buildings for it. So we have to do something to help parents who have taken and relieved our public school system because they've put their children in private school, but they need some help in financing that. Whether vouchers are the best way to do that, whether giving them tax breaks on their income tax or their tax filings is another way of doing that. We'd have to explore what the best way to help them, but we certainly need to help them because just like so many New Yorkers, the financial strains and the burden on people's home budgets are something that every family is dealing with right now. And families are smarter than government. Families look at how much money they have and then decide how to spend it. Our government of late has figured out how much they want to spend and then figured out how to get that money. And families are much smarter about that, but we have to help families because we would not be able to educate the children if all children went to public school, and we have to encourage people. And I'm always a believer in you should choose what school your child goes to anyhow.
How would you handle a situation where you strongly disagreed with something on ethical grounds, and as the Attorney General you were forced to take the opposite position as the Attorney for the state?
I mean, you know, you uphold the law. You take an oath to uphold the law. And, you know, my opponent has tried to make something like a woman's right to choose her health care, reproductive health care, as an issue. That's not an issue in this race. It has been the law of our land for nearly 40 years that every woman has the right to choose her reproductive health care. And it was the law in New York State, actually, even before Roe versus Wade. And that law will never change. And I have pledged to every woman in our state that I would not only uphold her right and defend her right to choose her reproductive health care, but that I would also take the appropriate measures against anyone who attempted to interfere with that right. And in my 7 years as District Attorney of Staten Island, not one woman on Staten Island has ever had her right to her reproductive health care impeded upon.
Staten Island District Attorney Dan Donovan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.